He checked into the hotel like any other guest, confident, successful, and proud of the life he had built. On the outside, he looked like a man who had achieved everything: a polished suit, a name everyone in his industry knew, and a smile that carried years of resilience. But to the staff who judged him not by his success, but by the color of his skin, none of that mattered. What started as a simple evening stay quickly turned into something far more sinister. A quiet lobby suddenly became a stage for humiliation, as whispers turned into accusations, and suspicion replaced respect. He wasn't treated like a guest, he was treated like a trespasser. And the shocking part? It wasn't because of what he did, it was because of who they thought he was. Every eye in the room followed him. Every word spoken dripped with prejudice. And within minutes, his world shifted from comfort to confrontation. But what no one in that hotel realized was that the man they tried to push out had the power to change their lives forever. How could one night in a luxury hotel turn into the ultimate test of dignity, power, and justice? And when the tables finally turned, who would truly pay the price? By all accounts, his life was the picture of success. A self-made CEO, he had built his company from nothing, countless late nights, endless sacrifices, and a determination that refused to break. To the world, he wasn't just wealthy, he was respected. The kind of man who walked into a room and commanded attention, not because of arrogance, but because of presence. That evening, he wasn't at a board meeting or a red carpet event. He was simply a guest, arriving at a five-star hotel after a long day of negotiations. To him, it was routine, another stop in the busy rhythm of his life. He handed over his bag, checked in, and expected nothing more than peace and quiet. But behind the polished counters and warm smiles of the lobby, something else lingered. It was subtle at first, the way an employee's eyes narrowed, the hesitation in their voice, the silent question of whether he belonged. He noticed it, but brushed it aside. After all, this was supposed to be a place of luxury, not judgment. Yet, beneath the glittering chandeliers and velvet carpets, tension was already forming. The kind of tension you can't quite see, but you feel, in the stiffness of the room, in the way conversations pause when you walk past. He didn't know it yet, but this ordinary check-in would soon unravel into a moment that exposed far more than prejudice. It would test everything he had built, everything he stood for, and everything this hotel claimed to represent. Because sometimes, the places that promise comfort and respect are the very ones that strip it away. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a misunderstanding. The concierge paused, brows furrowed, as if unsure what to do with the man standing in front of him. The card had already been swiped, the room confirmed, the receipt printed, but instead of handing over the key, the hesitation lingered. "Are you sure you're registered here?" the concierge finally asked, voice dipped in polite suspicion. The CEO blinked, caught off guard. He had reserved the suite days ago, sent his assistant to confirm twice. Yet now, under the chandelier's glow, he felt every eye in the lobby turn toward him. "Yes," he answered calmly, sliding the receipt across the counter. "Everything should be in order." But the man behind the desk didn't move. His gaze drifted over the CEO's tailored suit, the Rolex on his wrist, then back to his skin. And suddenly, the room seemed colder. Whispers began. Two other staff members stepped closer, their smiles tight, forced. The air carried a different weight now, not hospitality, but hostility. "We'll need to verify with management," one of them said. His tone wasn't neutral. It was layered, as though the man in front of him couldn't possibly belong. And just like that, the CEO's presence became a question mark. Minutes dragged. Guests passed by, some curious, some uncomfortable, none speaking. He stood there, holding himself with quiet dignity, but inside, a storm brewed. He had been here before, not in this hotel, not in this exact way, but in boardrooms, airports, restaurants. Places where success didn't shield him from suspicion. Still, he stayed composed. Then came the breaking point. A security guard appeared, summoned without his knowledge. "Sir," the guard said firmly, "we've had complaints. We're going to have to ask you to step aside." "Complaints? From whom?" He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't disrupted a thing. Yet in seconds, his role had shifted, from guest to intruder, from customer to problem. The lobby grew quiet. Phones tilted upward. People recorded. And there he was, a black man in a luxury hotel, suddenly stripped of his identity as CEO and reduced to nothing more than a stereotype. Every second burned with humiliation. He knew what they were seeing, not his achievements, not his power, just the image society had trained them to fear. "Step aside, sir," the guard repeated, louder this time. For a brief moment, the CEO considered leaving. Walking out, letting the injustice slide, saving his dignity by refusing to engage. But another part of him burned hotter. Why should he? He had every right to be here. Every document proved it. And yet, here he was, standing trial in a lobby that treated him like a trespasser. He straightened his back, voice steady but edged with fire. "No. I'm not stepping aside. I booked this room. I belong here." The words cut through the silence. But would they be enough? Because the eyes around him weren't softening, they were hardening. The whispers weren't stopping, they were multiplying. And the staff weren't backing down, they were closing in. The air felt suffocating, the walls pressing closer. He could feel it. This wasn't just about a room anymore. It was about his worth, his right to exist without question. And in that moment, he realized something terrifying. What was about to happen next wouldn't just test his patience. It would test the very limits of his power. The guard's voice thundered again, sharper, louder. "Sir, step aside, now." The CEO stood frozen in the center of the lobby, the glittering chandeliers above mocking the humiliation below. His chest tightened, heat rising in his face, but he refused to move. He had spent his life proving his worth, building an empire brick by brick, only to be reduced to a trespasser in a place he had paid to be. The standoff grew unbearable. Guests whispered behind their phones, recording every second as though it were entertainment. Some shook their heads in silent judgment, others smirked as if waiting for him to snap. The weight of centuries pressed onto his shoulders, every unspoken accusation, every stereotype hurled at men who looked like him. Then, the unthinkable. 2 more guards arrived, one reaching for his arm as though he were already guilty, already convicted. His body stiffened. He felt the burn of every stare, the silent message, "You don't belong here. Not in this lobby. Not in this world we've built." For the first time that evening, his calm cracked. A flash of rage, sharp and undeniable, surged through him. He yanked his arm back, his voice cutting through the room with unshakable force. "I said, I belong here." The words echoed, bouncing off marble walls, silencing the whispers for a split second. His defiance hung heavy in the air, daring anyone to deny his humanity. But silence can be crueler than noise. Because in that pause, the question lingered, would anyone stand with him? Or would they all stand against him? The guards advanced, the crowd leaned closer, and his heart pounded with the terrifying truth. This wasn't just about a hotel room. This was about his right to exist without permission. In that instant, he knew, the next move, his or theirs, would change everything. The guards never laid a hand on him. They didn't have the chance. Because in the middle of that tense silence, a manager rushed forward, papers in hand, his name printed clearly across the reservation. In one instant, the truth was undeniable. The CEO had every right to be there. But the damage had already been done. The humiliation wasn't erased by an apology. The stares didn't vanish just because the mistake had been cleared up. He walked past the guards and into his suite, but the victory felt hollow. Because no one in that lobby would remember the truth, they would only remember the spectacle. That night, he sat alone in his room, staring at the city lights through the glass. He wasn't thinking about the suite or the hotel anymore. He was thinking about how quickly his success, his wealth, his identity as a leader had been stripped away. How, in a matter of minutes, he had gone from valued guest to suspect. And if it could happen to him, what about those without his power, without his platform? The weight of that truth pressed harder than the guard's stares ever could. Because this wasn't just his story. It was the story of countless others, ordinary men and women whose lives are interrupted, questioned, or destroyed simply because of the skin they wear. In the morning, he made a choice. He didn't stay silent. He spoke out, not for himself alone, but for every person who couldn't. The hotel staff lost more than their jobs that day. They lost the illusion that prejudice could hide behind luxury walls. But still, he knew the fight wasn't over. Because one man's power can punish a few, but it takes a nation's conscience to dismantle what allowed it to happen in the first place. And so, the question lingers, not just for him, but for all of us: how many more times will dignity be questioned before humanity is finally recognized?